Well, last month, President Marcos certified as urgent the Senate bill proposing the Public-Private Partnership Act. The proposed law stipulates guidelines for PPP projects that may be financed partly from direct government appropriations or official development assistance of foreign governments or institutions. The measure also institutionalizes the PPP Center, giving it increased powers and functions to be the central agency monitoring all PPP projects in the country. Well, joining us now to discuss PPPs under the Marcos administration is attorney Mike Toledo. He is the Director of the Government and Public Affairs of Metro Pacific Investment Corporation. Attorney Toledo, good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us today. Nice to see you again and welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Armina, and to you, all your viewers. And really, it's really good to see you. And I always enjoy and always look forward to being in your program.
All right, so let's get on with the discussion today. In a recent article, because we know that you also are a columnist, you spoke about how PPP is a pillar in nation building. It's been around for quite some time now. How is the PPP now different in the PBBM era?
Well, it so happened that in the past administration, for example, there was more focus on ODA funded projects or projects coming from the General Appropriations Act. So these are, as compared to the PPP or public-private partnership, which is, as you know, would be funded by the private sector. The thing with the PPP is at least it is the principle of taxpayer that uses the particular project is the one paying, whereas in the ODA, everybody pays for it, or if it's coming from the General Appropriations Act. Case in point, for example, if you put up a railway project from, let's say, Manila to Clark, and if it's PPP, then all those that will be using the Manila to Clark railway project will be actually paying for it. And taxpayers' money are not, the taxpayers from Mindanao, for example, who are unable to use such a project will not be burdened by that. So that is the advantage of a PPP project over perhaps an ODA or a project that is taken from the General Appropriations Act. And President Marcos has been very categorical and unequivocal that they are now focusing solely on the conventional PPP, knowing fully well that such you can harness the expertise of both the government and the private sector. You can ensure professionalism in the implementation of the project. And to show you how serious the president is, he immediately came up recently, I think that was last month, early last month, wherein he already mandated that a member of the private sector sit on the PPP governing board. So to make sure that the private sector can actively participate in discussions, they have come up with amendments to the then restrictive provisions of the implementing rules and regulations of the BOT.
Right.
And that allowed a number of PPP projects. I was informed by Secretary Jokno that a lot of important PPP projects like NAIA, like the PGH's Cancer Center, for example, in billions of pesos, were approved record-breaking time.
Let's talk about that, because both houses of Congress really trumpeting this morning as they opened their second regular session about the need to amend the BOT law to make way for the Public-Private Partnership Act. How will this solve a lot of the problems and issues hounding this very concept of PPP in the past?
Well, definitely, because clearly this government is moving in one direction, because the conductor of the orchestra is very clear as to where he wants to lead this country in terms of infrastructure development. The good thing is this administration has continued what President Duterte started, which was build, 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 and 5% of GDP is focused on infrastructure. And President Marcos has said that all those projects that are, of course, that should be continued, especially in infrastructure, shall be continued, and it's being done. Unlike in the past, perhaps when a new administration comes in, usually the new administration puts on the sideline or derails an existing project, no matter how good it is. That is why it's always an issue that falls under the concept of material adverse government action, wherein there's a successor risk where every time there's a new change of administration. So these amendments to the BOT law will ensure will encourage the private sector to really come in and invest heavily in infrastructure. It will perhaps, to a large measure, make it easy to get right-of-way issues. One of the major roadblocks.
You know, Attorney Mike, I was gonna talk to you about that, because as you just were beginning to say, it is a major roadblock. I mean, you have this project ready to go, and yet it's really shackled by right-of-way issues. But the government should have the power to expropriate. But why is this happening?
Well, that's the sad thing. Yes, indeed, government is the Constitution and implementing rules and regulation provides clearly the right of government to expropriate, especially for a valid reason, and of course for as long as there is proper compensation. But then again, while we have all the laws in place, in fact, I recall there's even a presidential decree which you cannot really derail, especially important flagship governments of projects. Sadly, the reality on the ground is there are really such delays. One of them, of course, is it takes a while for the expropriation proceedings to continue. There's due process involved, so it takes time. And time would cost money as far as the investor is concerned, as far as the concessionaire is concerned. Any delay in the delivery of right-of-way will definitely mean an increase in the cost of the construction, and any increase in the cost of construction would actually also be detrimental to aside from the delay in the project itself, it will also be detrimental to the commuting public or consumers for that matter, because the concessionaire would have to, of course, increase now whatever the toll rates agreed upon.
So how will amendments now to the BOT law, paving the way for the PPP Act, clear this huge hurdle in the advancement of PPP projects?
First of all, definitely there will be clear timelines. Secretary Balisacan has already said categorically that there will be clear guidelines, rather timelines that should be followed by the different departments and different agencies, including the PP Center, to ensure that milestones that have been identified are carried out. And that will be, so this will be in relation or in conjunction with existing laws on the ease of doing business, with existing laws on liberalization on public, and then as well as the amendments of the Public Utilities Act. I mean, these are all interrelated to ensure that when an investor comes in, he can immediately come in and invest, he can immediately start the project, and he can immediately closely coordinate with government to ensure that the project is delivered on time. So there are a number of provisions, I believe, in the amendments of the BOT law, which will ensure that commitments of government are delivered on time. Two, that commitments and agreed upon contractually, for example, commitments as to how much should go to the concessionaire or to the investor should also be respected. Because the last thing we want, if we are to encourage private investors to come in and join PPP, the government's credibility is definitely at stake. If government changes rules midstream, if government reneges on what they have agreed upon in contract provisions, or worse, even totally ignore arbitral awards given by an international arbitral body, this does not bode well for Philippine investments.
So there's got to be predictability, no more moving targets.
Yes, predictability, transparency. These are two things that are crucial for any business and for any foreign investor. They want to see transparency, to know what is there, and so they can properly react or present whatever it is needed to be presented, and predictability. Let's say if let's say there are conflicts, because conflicts are bound to happen one way or the other. Where do they go? Is there a process wherein they can present their case? And is there the process of review? Is there a process of compensation in case that the agreement is to be terminated? So those two things you correctly mentioned are very important.
All right, talk to us about the agriculture sector. How can this sector really harness the transformative power of PPPs?
Good point. Actually, PPP is not only limited to infrastructure, but also it could be used and harnessed in the agricultural sector with the same principles. Exactly, if you have a project that involves a massive amount of investment in the agriculture sector, which, as we all know, sadly, while we're generally agricultural as a nation, in terms of its contribution to GDP is quite minimal and small. And yet we always say that we are rich in natural resources, just like mining, although that's another topic altogether, which I could discuss perhaps in the future. So yes, clearly, in fact, in our group, if I may, with your indulgence, if I may share, the Metro Pacific Investment Corporation and its subsidiary, the Metro Pacific Agricultural Ventures Corporation, MPAV, have already been talking to several potential investors, where we will be working together to perhaps go into different kinds of farming. We've already started a dairy plant, dairy processing, which will be the most modern dairy plant in the country. And now we're going heavily also to looking into possible planting of rice and corn, with the end in view to ensure energy security. The group has decided that at the end of the day, aside from its investments in tollways, investments in infrastructure, airports, telecoms, etc., and power, as you know, there is really a need to ensure food security, because if a pandemic again happens, and God forbid, but we know it's bound to happen, where will we be able to get our food for our people? What if the other country suddenly decides to say, no, we're not exporting, we will be using this, and so where will we get it? So it is imperative for us to focus, and we strongly believe that the private sector, with the help, of course, of government, through a PPP modality, like, for example, providing the land. And then there are a lot of government lands that are apparently not being used. And if these lands are perhaps suitable for a certain type of crop or product or any form of agri-venture or agro-industrial venture, then it should be opened up to the private sector, and the private sector to take a look. So clearly, you are right, Carmina. This is one area wherein PPP can really play a crucial role for food security.
I wish we had more time to discuss a host of other issues, but we're going to have to leave it at that. We ran out of time. Attorney Mike Toledo, their Director for Government and Public Affairs of the Metro Pacific Investment Corp. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Carmina. Maybe next time on mining.
Maybe. Take care.